9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I believe we are live with Brother Calvin Allen. Howdy with the folks who just sang it. Tell us in 50 words. Tell us who you are, sir.
Oh, I've never done that before. I'm Calvin Allen. I am an evangelist, local church evangelist, and I travel everywhere across the States and Canada, mostly, and been mission trips and so forth. I got saved. I was born in Gary, Indiana, and I moved to Milwaukee when I was 5. I got saved at Faith Baptist Church, and I served on staff there after college for 13 years, almost 14 years, and I've been evangelism for almost 3 years next month.
Very cool. Awesome. Now, I didn't count how many words that was. It's got to be close. Let's see. So you mentioned Canada and U.S. and all that. Obviously, you live somewhere up north. Where do you live abouts?
I live in the Milwaukee area, just south of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which I've lived here pretty much the last 32 years, except for college.
Very cool. Now, where'd you go to college at?
Texas Baptist College.
Very cool.
And
awesome.
Actually, they changed their name after I left. It's Texas Independent Baptist Seminary now.
Got to make it just a little bit more theologically sound. Independent Baptist. Amen.
That's
Amen.
exactly right.
So, local church evangelist for how many years you said now?
For 3 years.
Awesome.
I've traveled off and on throughout the entire time I've been in the ministry, but I felt the Lord leading me, and we can kind of talk about that later, I guess, a little bit.
Sure.
But the Lord was leading me, and it was so obvious. I probably threw, like Gideon only threw out 2 fleeces, I think.
Right.
I threw out like 102. So
just had to be sure.
I'm telling you, I had no desire to leave my church, but the Lord was moving, and so I was like, okay, we'll obey, we'll follow.
There you go. Now you have good pastor, Brother Dean Noonan, and he's a good guy. We have a chance to. I'm trying to think here. He is the only varsity head coach that I never played for, so I don't think he likes me very much at Midwest Christian Boys football camp. I played for Cecil Ballard on Red JV back in the day, way back in the day, but never got drafted to Red varsity. Everybody else. A couple times burgundy, a couple times the blue, once to green, and so anyway, I don't think he likes me, but that's all right.
He actually personally told me he didn't before I told him. No, I'm just kidding.
I was wondering that. I was wondering that. So, local church evangelist, what is in that job description besides everything for someone that has no idea what an evangelist does? What are you doing?
So, I actually, the funny thing is I don't really like that term. Just because it sounds weird coming from me that I would say I don't like that term.
Sure.
But I like the term revivalist probably more than evangelist.
Okay.
I feel like evangelist is more, like running crusades and soul winning campaigns. And so that not that I've never done that, but that's not everything that I do. And so, I kind of feel like it's a misnomer at times. From what a biblical evangelist is, I probably would fall more in the lines of a preacher, a little bit of a prophet in there. But yeah, so for those that don't know, essentially I travel full time to churches. I put on mainly my main focus is revivals. So mainly revivals. I've done Bible conferences before, missions conferences. I've preached those. And again, that's not my forte, although I love missions. And I've been on the mission field. I've been to Asia. I've been to the Caribbean and Haiti, and of course Canada, but that doesn't count. That's like, northern Wisconsin. But but I love missionaries. I have more missionary friends than I can shake a stick at. And here's a little factoid also. I can say hello in 26 different languages.
There you go.
And so some I know more than others. I'm not fluent in Spanish, but my goal is this year to be fluent. But I have been soul winning in Spanish also. But I can count in 5 languages. So I love cultures. I love languages of people. And so that's something that has always interested me. But, so missions conferences, I still love doing them. I do Christian school revivals. And recently I haven't done one in years, but music clinics. Mm-hmm. And I'm getting ready to do one. Most people don't know that I was a music director actually for 13 years.
Okay.
And so I've taught piano, voice, obviously choral music in the high school level, and all those different things. I've recorded 13 or 14 different CDs, but I also work with choirs and getting the most. I feel like I can do a lot vocally with the person. Give me about an hour with the choir, I can probably have them singing louder and with more um, uh, pathos, emotion than they've
Mm-hmm.
probably sung before. And so that's where I'm looking forward to. I've actually got another one coming up here soon. So that's one of the things I'm very passionate about is music and music done first class. I think a lot of times organizationally, sometimes people are there, but as far as sometimes with the revivalistic spirit, but also with vocal technique, I think people are lacking. And
Sure.
so for the last 20 years, I've been working on it and studying the voice. And so I think that's a lot that I can offer churches. So that's what I do mainly. I travel full time, special days. I've done bus camps. I've done camps, a lot of youth conferences. Um, and so I'm all over the board except for, like prophecy conferences.
There you go. There you go. So many hats, a lot of different things going on. Now,
Absolutely.
how many different churches or ministries are you in a normal year?
Okay. So I didn't check on 2018 yet. I'm like, what year are we in? But I didn't check 2018 yet. But um, 2017, I was in, I believe it was 38 to 40 different churches.
Awesome.
And so I know it was even increased this past year. And so that's just unbelievable blessing. And I'm as busy. Like I said, I never planned on leaving my church at all.
Sure.
Um, and that's also incredible thinking that I've never advertised.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying I'm against those that do. I always have this
Sure.
conversation because, I've talked with Brother Hall at Providence, and
Hmm.
he's wanting me to come there sometime. I've preached probably in 3 or 4 different Bible colleges, and some student always comes up to me and say, "Hey, I want to be an evangelist. What should I do?" And first thing I tell them to do, and if they listen to this, I hope people listen to this. I think you got to go serve in a church for at least 2 years.
Hmm.
I think my pastor and I, long before I actually was an evangelist, we had this conversation because I was kind of his administrative assistant there for Pastor Noonan. We were basically joined at the hip. I could tell people what he was going to tell them in counseling sessions before
Sure.
he told them,
Sure.
so, but we had conversations like this all the time. And so we thought, if somebody calls me and wants to come to my church and they don't have any experience in church ministry,
Right.
why? I mean, yes, they can preach, but if a
Right.
guy, but for me, it's I know how to preach, but it's also I know what it's like to invest in somebody and to try to disciple them and bring them up, and so I don't preach in a way to run people off
Sure.
because I
Sure.
know how hard it was to get that person to that point.
Right.
And
Right.
so, and plus, I can come in as with the experience that I have, I can come in and help them with the music program. I
Hmm.
can help them. I've been a soul winning director. I've been a bus captain before. I've been a nursing home preacher before. So I've cleaned toilets, so
There you
it's
go.
like, all these different things that I think a guy needs to have some experience under him. But then I never advertised. I never sent out a letter from my pastor. Everybody said, you got to send out a letter. You got to revival fires, this newspaper, that newspaper. And I just never done it.
Hmm.
Partly because I was like, you know what? I want to know that God's doing this
Sure.
because I had no desire to leave my church.
Right.
So it was
So
like,
that was one of 102 fleeces for you then.
exactly.
Right. But no, what you're saying is exactly right. I mean, I've found in just knowing a lot of people that some of the best pastors, some of the best people in ministry were very successful in other careers, and God moved
Sure.
them to other things. When you demonstrate proficiency and excellence in one thing, it lends itself to being good at something else as well. And same to be true for evangelism or anything.
Yeah,
If you can't do the local church ministry, then to call yourself a local church evangelist is a hard thing to
exactly.
be able to. And thankfully, so many of the good men that come to football camp and a lot of the different ministries and a lot of evangelists that I know, I think of like
Yeah.
Todd Monaghan or somebody. He's bringing people down the aisle every week.
Please don't mention his name. We're out of. No, I'm just kidding.
But he does such great work in his home church, and he's just it's spilling over into other people's ministries as well, and so that's awesome.
I feel like one of the lost attributes is loyalty in our generation, and part of that loyalty, and it's not a biblical character trait, although it is. It's what it is the word loyalty is not in the Bible. It's the word faithful that's in Scripture.
Right.
And if you cannot be faithful over the few things, how can you be ruler over many?
Right. Right.
And so Jesus taught, if you cannot teach as I have, if you can't teach a first grade boy Sunday school class,
right,
and or run a rally time, or it's funny because I always tease that I don't particularly care for children's ministry, although I love doing it. Once I do it, it's the weirdest thing. But if my preacher asked me to do it, I did it.
Right.
And so,
well, and that's another great point. If you won't listen to what your pastor asks you to do, you're probably not going to hear what God wants you to do either. Yeah. And it kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah. I think people would be surprised at how many evangelists aren't truly local church. And I never criticize people. I let God deal with anybody.
Sure.
But I think sometimes it's to the place where you've got people that they live in one state and they're a member of a church in another. It's like, that's not like, do you ever talk to your pastor and say, hey, preacher, is anywhere on my schedule where, you wouldn't prefer me to go, or, am I getting too busy in my schedule? Right. Am I not at home enough? Those are all things that if we're truly local church, those are some things you've got to consider, because, some people, they're not pastorable, or they're not putting themselves under the authority of the local church while claiming to be local church. And so, when I'm at home, I'm in my church, I'm in my local church. I schedule myself to be home during our yearly revival. I may a lot of times miss the Sunday, but I will not miss, the meat of the revival in our missions conference. Those are two things I pretty much always schedule to be at home, because I want to stay connected to my church. Yep. And I enjoy singing while I'm here. So, but then again, to say that we've got to learn and teach these young people that if you're going to be a help to churches, be a help to your church first.
Right.
And then I think God will elevate, God will honor that as you, same thing with missionaries. If you're going to be a missionary, the greatest thing you could do, I noticed lately that a lot more missionaries are serving with another missionary first, and then launching out from there.
Right.
Versus, okay, we're going to go in the middle of this city here, and we're going to, and not that it's the worst thing you can do, but I thought, man, if you can get that extra train, that real hands-on, that, Bible colleges, I know it's supposed to be hands-on, but it's just not the same.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
so I think that's a great thing as an evangelist to stay local church. But that's always my advice to guys. And so the Lord has kept me busy with that mentality. I've never advertised. I've never called one preacher in 3 years and said, I want to meet. And I'm not against those that do.
Sure.
But that's just that to me. I always tell the Lord, if you dry up my meetings, that means I need to move on.
Right. So. And talking about being faithful in little things and not being too big for anything. I always appreciate the guys, and there'll be people that come to your mind as well as mine when you talk about people that are just down to earth. They're not above talking to anybody. They're not above. We had a God Bless America prayer rally this afternoon, and Brother Scott Pauley was here, kind of running that, and just watching him interact with people he's never met before. We had some folks come. It's Independent Fundamental Baptist prayer rally. Had some folks come from the Latter-day Saints church come, and it wasn't like he was I don't know what they call him. It wasn't like he was a pastor. It was this lady, and God bless her. Thank you, for sending her. I was praying the whole time. I was like, it was a prayer meeting, and how testimonies or public prayer and things like that, and you never know what's going to happen. And around our church, we get some odd folks and all that. But watching after the service, she came up and talked to Brother Paulie and just the way his demeanor and just the way he interacted with her. She wasn't below him and all of that. And so I appreciated that.
Absolutely.
And so it's one of those things where you have the opportunity to impact so many people going all over the country, but you can't get too big for your local church. Exactly what you're saying. You can't go that.
Two things. I think if my pastor always reminds me that he's praying for two things for me, and he also reminds me to be these two things, it's to stay holy and stay humble. I cannot tell you how many texts I've got from the preacher or conversations we've been in. And he says, stay holy, keep yourself clean, keep yourself pure, keep yourself on the right track, morally, spiritually, all these different areas, keep yourself on track, but then also stay humble and God will use you. I thought it was a great, and I'm going to give a shout out to Dr. Bob Gray Jr. He and I, we preached together last week in Colorado. And he's preached. I mean, he as a teenager, he preached to me, and just God used him to change my life. And as an alumni of his college now, it was interesting because he had never heard me preach, and we had never preached together. We had never really been in the same meeting where we even sang or preached at the same time. And but he, much like myself, I get it from Pastor Noonan. Pastor Noonan is like your fishing buddy. He's just that guy that just, he'll come up behind you and pour a cup of water on you but he'll pray with you too. He's just a good balance. And so, but it was like both of us, they had to pull us, Brother Bob and I at this meeting, this youth conference, they had to almost pull us both away each night because we were talking to so many people after the service. And so it's like, those are the kind of preachers that I want my kids around too. Those that I can just shoot the breeze with. And I'll give you a good story here. So I was up in, you mentioned Canada. And so for the last 2 years, I've preached in the Arctic Circle in August.
Cool.
It's literally cool. No, but so I was up there, and this man, one of the men from the church, he's probably one of the older men in the church, and his name's Tommy, and Tommy Wright, and he's old. He's part American, part Native Canadian. And so he's going on and on about how this preacher, I think it was Brother Bickish, if I'm not mistaken, American preacher started their church up there. It's 120 miles north of the Arctic Circle line, a city called Inuvik. And Brother Bickish used to bring them to the States and, fly them. He was a pilot, I guess, and he flew them in and out of the States and everything else before you needed passports. And he said, one time, he said, Brother Bickish took us to the States and he's like, we went to Texas and we went, and he's like, he took us to the south and I forget where it was, but it was somewhere in Louisiana. And he said there was this guy there and he had these boats and he took us hunting. And he's like, every one of us loved to hunt. And he was like a mink hunter or something like that. And he's like, yeah, his name was Keith Gomez. And then he says, I have no idea what happened to that guy, but he was a really good hunter and fisher. I was like, what? So I got to tell him, cool. Like, you have no idea how God.
Right.
But only thing he remembered was this guy took me hunting and fishing.
Mm-hmm.
And he made an impact on him that 30 some years later, he still remembered his name.
Right.
And that's just like, whether somebody hears me preach or not, maybe it's just even a conversation with me after the service, or they said, I want you to pray for my dad. And we prayed and they said, hey, remember 5 years ago when that's the impact I want to make. It's not necessarily a big name. I just want the Lord to use me in those kind of ways.
Right. That's awesome. Very cool. So you have a lot of preaching going on, a lot of serving in local church as well. What else? What other hobbies? Leading question here. What other hobbies do you have besides music that we might be interested in?
I knew we were going to get to jiu-jitsu one night.
Yeah,
one time. But I am super passionate about martial arts, but now specifically jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things like people have sometimes a preconceived notion about. My wife says I need to back up. My face is close to the screen. Okay,
that's all right. You're good.
She must be chimed in. But so jiu-jitsu, I'm extremely passionate about it. But some people have it in their mind like it's like this mystical. Anything dealing with the martial arts is a mystical thing, and I'm like, there's nothing mystical about it whatsoever. But I got interested in it years ago watching the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and it was basically started to prove the effectiveness of jiu-jitsu. And so it's mainly a ground fighting art. It's not only ground fighting, but that's the main gist of it. And it's almost like an alligator pulling. An alligator cannot beat a lion on land.
Right.
But if you will pull him down to his territory, he's the king. He might be the king of the jungle, but he's not the king of the river.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you basically make a person play on your terms. But so if to put it in perspective here, I teach about 4 classes a week if I'm in town. There's 4 assigned classes for me to teach on Monday at noon, Monday night, Wednesday at noon, and Thursday nights. So whatever part of the week I'm in, I will teach those classes, but I'm also training an additional 3 times a week besides that. And so it's a great workout. I wanted to be around a long time for my kids. Mm-hmm. And I was already working at a gym, but I thought, you know what, I'm gonna take up jiu-jitsu. And I literally, anytime I'm in a pastor's home, if he has kids, they will learn some jiu-jitsu before I leave. Right. I taught preachers' wives, preachers' daughters, especially. They just a couple different things that could really help them and save them. Yesterday I was here at home. I'm home this week. I'm preaching in our Spanish church tomorrow here at home. But I just had a yesterday training session for about an hour and 45 minutes, which we haven't gone that long in a session in a long time. And then this morning also, generally after soul winning time, I will go over and train for about an hour with our guys. And so it's a lot of fun. I wish more preachers would get into it. I wish more Christians would get into it just because, it's just good to know. I believe the Bible says if you provide not for your own, you're worse than an infidel. And I think that's also their self-defense. So at the least, you ought to have a sword by your side, sure. A biblical sword, which nowadays right. for us is a M16. But anyways, no, but I think you ought to defend them physically also and provide defense for them. Two of my boys right now, 2 of my 3 boys are in jiu-jitsu, and my youngest, we're working on him. He's only 6, but we're working. He'll play around the house with his brothers, but he's not quite into class yet.
Sure. Well, it's one of those skills that in any day and age, it really doesn't matter. Yeah. But speaking of the martial arts, we are, as Christians even, we are so detached from back in the day when you had to go kill that deer to survive. That's what it was you kill or be killed, and that's how it was, or just die of starvation. But we're so detached from because we can go down to Walmart or Target or whatever and get everything we need. We feel like everything's good. But civilization is great until uncivilized people, cause a problem. And of all of those that, it's not just Brother Calvin, touting the efficacy of jiu-jitsu. There's a reason that basically every single martial arts champion in the UFC, in MMA, at least has a working knowledge of jiu-jitsu. It used to be back in the day, the champion was normally a jiu-jitsu practitioner. Now all of them are. It's just how good of one you are. And obviously there's other layers with Taekwondo, Judo, and all the other things that go on to that, and just striking in general, wrestling. But there's one that kind of trumps all. And if you don't know that, you are – because what is the stat? I know it's absurd, but how many percentage of fights go to the ground like a street fight? Is it like 90% or what?
It's 90% or above.
Right.
I mean, you all you have to do is really just watch a video of somebody fighting.
Right.
So it's like it's gonna go there.
Right.
So you really, and there's always a lucky punch, but that's why I took karate, taekwondo before, but I also know how to, jiu-jitsu is about managing the distance. Mm-hmm. So if I take away your ability to hit me. Mm-hmm. Like I can stand close enough to you where you can't even get any oomph behind that punch,
right?
Or I can be so far away. So if a jiu-jitsu guy can manage his distance, he wins that fight. I mean, 9.9 times out of 10, he wins that fight.
Right. And if you don't like getting punched, then jiu-jitsu is a really good option for you because, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're competing, it's scored based the positions, not pins, but they're scored based off of how efficient you'd be able to strike someone from that position. if you have them in some case, I know submissions and things like that, but if you have full mount on somebody when you're sitting on their chest, you can kind of rain things on their face, and they can't do anything to stop you. Now, you wouldn't do that in a jiu-jitsu competition, but if you're ever put in that position, and if you want to have the ability to protect your family, if you live in a state that's not communist, go get yourself. But some of these videos you see, some of these guys where you don't understand, you don't even get to your gun. You don't have a chance. And most guys, if they fire more than 50 rounds to their pistol in a year, that's a lot for them. And so whether they'd be able to pull it out without dropping it is, I mean, in all seriousness, if you have, just as PSA, if you have a weapon, train with it. Otherwise, it's useless to you. But same with your body. You have one, God gave it to you. Use it. Practice. And now that's awesome. Go ahead.
We were, and we'll get back to spiritual things in a minute, but I've had different guys. One of the guys at our gym, and he was more advanced than I was, but he's been an MMA person, but he also worked security for different places. And I said to him, because I'm a concealed carry, my wife has her license also, I have my license to carry. And I said, let's do this scenario. I said, you and I are going to be talking, and I'm going to threaten you. You're going to try to pull a gun on me. And by the time he pulled his gun, all I had to do was stabilize his wrist and punch him in the face. Mm-hmm. I didn't do it. I just did the motions. Right. But I said, you have to understand there's a way to draw your gun even. Mm-hmm. But what it is jiu-jitsu puts you in a martial mentality, in a mindset of distance and leverage. And so it doesn't matter what the tool is. It just matters that I need to manage the distance between you and I. Right. So whether it's positioning my fire hand away from your body, it's another distance thing. So I think it's crucial. I like that you pointed out that the different points are awarded in jiu-jitsu tournaments based upon your ability to strike your opponent. Mm-hmm. There's a great tactician, John Danaher, that kind of pointed that out. And he
I know of whom you speak.
Yes. And so I was listening to him one day do an interview, and I was like,
by the way, I think I'm going to have him on the podcast next week. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, go ahead.
Although I think he's an atheist, so I'd like to witness to him, actually.
There you go.
I know Brother Todd has witnessed to a lot of those guys. He actually, a couple of them led to Christ, awesome. Professional fighters. Yeah. But he pointed that out, and I thought, you're right, because the highest scoring positions are mount and then back mount, which means they have no defense from behind them. Mm-hmm. And so, it's still training you for a martial situation. Right. And the crazy world we're living in it's amazing. I had one of my two students one day. They were in my fundamentals class, and their dad would bring them in every day, and he would stay there and watch the class and would videotape certain techniques so they could go home and work on them. Well, there was he was at the lakefront here at the beach in our area, and there was a guy who was a little bit inebriated, and he said before I knew what I was doing, he said the guy was threatening my friend, and I kind of told him, why don't you go somewhere? And he said before I knew it, the guy had thrown a punch at me. I blocked it. I turned him around and choked him. And he's like, I just held it for a couple seconds and let the guy go, and the guy just stumbled off and wondering what just happened to me. And that was just from a guy who was watching our classes.
Right. Yeah.
So we've got to be, as far as there's a lot of people on here that are soul winners, and we had an incident here years ago where, thank the Lord, nothing crazy happened, but a man ended up slapping a lady. One of our soul winners. Now, our pastor and his brother went to find that guy later, but I'll just say he's never been heard from since. But no, they didn't find him.
Don't mess with Brother Noonan.
Man, don't. Either one of them, man. Either one of the brothers, just give it up. But I think had that lady, I would have loved to have taught that lady beforehand.
Sure. Some
self-defense, that if somebody swings at you, you put your arm out, you just block their bicep. You just stop their bicep, stops all of their motion, stops all of their force. And so, we were talking about our new gym. We're building a new building right now. We're doubling the size of our property right now, our building. Awesome. And that's one of the first things we talked about was getting some classes in. So, but I'd like to get my wife studying more, and but she's watching the boys' classes also. And so I know she's gleaning some wisdom, at least, from that. So I like it. I
That's
like it.
awesome.
That's one of my passions. I preach it everywhere I go, and because it's a way of thinking. Also, it
Hmm.
teaches you to face your problems. It teaches you um, to stop. The Bible says, "Be still and know." Brother, I think we have the same glasses.
We might. A little like a wood texture on the side. Oh
Yes,
man,
the Ricky
great
Smiley.
minds. What is it? What is it here? I don't know.
It's a
Great.
it says
Yeah, yeah,
black,
yep.
brown, Ricky Smiley.
That's it, man. Great
What
minds think
about
alike.
it? I'm
There you
telling you.
go. I was like, it was like looking in a mirror for a second here.
Yeah,
I
you are
thought.
you are kind of darker skinned, so it's
Yeah, and in the summer I get really dark. So,
I believe it.
joking, I posted that picture of you in my Instagram story of looking a little bit, how should
Oh
we
yeah.
say, Arabic or
Yes.
Middle Eastern.
Middle
And
Eastern,
so,
yeah.
if I grow this out just a little bit,
Oh,
I
I
can
can see that.
definitely, with the Jewish descent, I can definitely pass for. We went to Israel 2 years ago, and I did not look too out of place. So big schnoz and everything.
Wow.
It was good to go. So,
That is awesome.
yeah.
But no, man, but that's where, I'm a firm believer in jiu-jitsu. I try to spread it everywhere I go, but I love the mentality behind it. The Bible says, that's what I was getting to.
Hmm.
Be still and know that I am God. And one of the things it did for me is being in some terrible positions, but being able to find a peace in the midst of a storm.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think people have lost that ability, and men have lost that ability to not crumble when everything is stacked against you and everything has gone wrong, and you're in a position where it's like you mentally you could give up right now, or you
Hmm.
could say, you know what, I'm going to put one foot in front of the other. I told some guys this afternoon, I was training after our training session, and I was just giving them some extra little instruction and help. But I said, the thing you want to do is improve to the next thing. You don't have to make a big sweeping motion. It's just what's in front of you. Face the issue. Always
Hmm.
face the person and get something between you and them. And just little by little, and that's the Christian life, really. It's getting, I love it. A song that says, it talks about Jesus was standing between me and the storm. And it's
Hmm.
like, I just need to be still right now.
Hmm.
And he's going to show up. The skill's going to show up, and I'm going to be all right.
Right.
So that's why I love it, man. As you can tell, that's one of my passions.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, practically speaking, if someone wanted to get into jiu-jitsu, how should they pick a gym? What are they looking for? What are some keys? Not instead of just going to the one place that
Sure.
says jiu-jitsu or BJJ
Yeah.
or whatever. How should they pick a gym?
Okay. So it depends on what they want out of that gym. Okay. For example, there's a really high pressure competition gym near us. Nothing wrong with it, but you're going to get that style, and they're going to push you to compete. A lot of younger guys there. I mean, a lot of injury prone stuff. And so I didn't join there because that's not really at the stage of life I am. I know I look young, but I'll be 38 in a couple months.
Whoa.
And so I know. And, so, I mean, so that's not what I wanted. And
Right.
so our gym is kind of a good mixture. We have people that compete, but we also have people that just do it. So I would look for what I want in that gym. If I'm looking for self-defense stuff, then if you look on a gym's website and they have 200 trophies and medals, you probably don't want to go there if you're not competitive. But then also look for go in and just take a class.
Hmm.
You know,
So many of them offer free classes in different
yes,
things, or even a month, 2 months of free classes.
yep.
So yeah.
Most places, like we have a deal going right now for, I think it's a 30-day deal or 20 classes, whatever it is. And so guys can check it out and see if it's what they want. They can get some basic, training in jiu-jitsu, but then see if they want to pursue it. So that's one of the things that you should do. Definitely check place. Don't just check out the first place you see. You may find out that the guy's a world champion there, but he doesn't know how to teach very well.
Sure. Right.
Which you may find a guy who maybe is a lower belt, but he's a really great transfer of knowledge of jiu-jitsu. And I would rather learn from that guy any day. I've had instructors in the past that were high level, but they just weren't good at communicating. And so I would rather get somebody that's skilled in transferring knowledge.
Right. Right.
It's like the theologian is not always the greatest preacher. So,
Right.
you have to find that balance of where you're going to go to school. Price may be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
There's some gyms that we annihilate them as far as competition goes in our jiu-jitsu, but they charge more than 2 times what we charge.
Mm-hmm.
So we're finding now we're getting students from these places that are like, man, it's better jiu-jitsu and it's half the price.
Right.
So, so it depends on what you're looking for. Now, if they got quality and they're worth it and you got the budget, by all means.
Right.
But those are just some, first reaction kind of practical into getting in jiu-jitsu. I think every parent, man, if you got to get your kids in some martial art.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can get them in jiu-jitsu young, it's going to help them with a lot of, especially your boys, man. My boys, I was like, I don't care if you quit. If you get your blue belt after, so many years, you can quit after that.
Sure.
But a blue belt, just all the basic knowledge.
You're going to be at a blue belt. You're going to be able to physically take on 99% of the population and win in a knockdown drag out if you had to. What would be your, all things being equal, someone says, I barely have the time. I don't really have the money. What is your pitch to, and reason I'm sticking on this for a reason, and probably the same reason you would, because I think people need to learn how to control their bodies, learn how to defend themselves, get in touch with that. I've done a few trial classes. I'm not actively in it right now, though I would like to, just with time of life and all that stuff. But man, they asked me, have you ever rolled before? Meaning, have you ever, for those that don't know, have you ever sparred with somebody, in just kind of I don't know how what you guys do, but they did 6-minute rounds or something. Yep. And dude, I did 2 rounds. And I was literally going to die. I was going to die. I was so exhausted. I was this close to throwing up. Like, no joke. I went into the bathroom thinking, I hate throwing up. I'm about to throw up. But what it was it was a wake up call that you ain't as bad as you think you are.
Yeah.
And talking about being humble, that's a really good way to be humble. When you're getting thrown around by someone literally half your size. I'm a pretty hefty guy, and I'm not super weak or anything. Yeah. And when someone has only been doing it for 12 months and is blowing you away, but all that to say, I mean, and probably for you, I mean, like talk about mindset, just like those that take the time, spend the time on the daily basis to read their Bible, pray, walk with God. The comparison, when you walk into a room and something bad goes down, spiritually speaking. You're dealing with a bad situation, counseling a teenager away from a bad situation. You're forearmed. You're ready to deal with it. But on the other side, I mean, but in those situations, normally someone isn't going to die. Yeah. In I'd say real life, but you know what I'm saying. When you're in a bad situation, though, thankfully Christians don't find themselves in that scene very often. Yeah. But you never know.
You never know.
Go ahead.
The scripture tells us in 2 Timothy 2:15, is it? Study to show thyself approved unto God. Mm-hmm. A workman that needeth not to be ashamed. So the shame, rightly dividing the word of truth. And when you are not prepared spiritually that way, you will become ashamed because when you could have been preparing, we were sloughing off or not paying attention or going through it ho-hum. Mm-hmm. And we should have been prepared. We should have been studying to show ourselves approved. So there's approval or a shame.
Right.
Okay. And when you train your body as well as your spiritual body, your spiritual mind, you are getting to the place where if I had to defend my wife, I would not have to do it with shame and say, oh, honey, kids, sorry, dad got, dad got whooped, it's like, I feel it's the same way. It's when, just to give you an idea. So I rolled 3 rounds today just with one of my partners, 3 in a row. With a young wrestler guy, just starting out, but his brother does it, and he's kind of got him into it, and he's got a lot of natural skill for it because he wrestled in high school.
Right.
But so we were the last 2 there, and I was like, hey, you want to still roll? And he's like, oh yeah, let's do at least one. Well, we ended up doing it 3 in a row, and that was after I'd rolled with one of my guys who's 6'5" or 6'4" and like 275 pounds. Yeah. Who's a fellow blue belt also, so this guy's, doing whatever. And, but it's a humbling experience though, especially, sometimes we'll have a young lady in our gym before that these 200-pound guys would come in and she would annihilate them. And I've seen them back in the locker room with their head down thinking, what just happened to my manhood,
Yep. Yep.
So it's like, we ought to be prepared though. But you're right though. It's a reality check. For me, I was going to the gym before I started jiu-jitsu. I was going to the gym several times a week. I was lifting, I was doing cardio. I thought I was going to die on the warm up. Okay. And I was like, man, I don't know if this is for me, but I'm not quitting. I got no quit in me. So I was just like almost indignant for a while. Like, this sport will not conquer me.
Right.
But it's a reality check. Some guys, they watch it, they see a movie or something. These guys are fighting for, 10 minutes in this movie. And it's like, dude, I'm telling you, after
a car
seconds,
chase, and after a foot race, and
after 30 seconds, man, most guys on the planet they're going to be huffing and puffing.
Yep.
And that's the name of jiu-jitsu though. If I can last 30 to 40 seconds with a guy, I got him.
Right.
99% of the people on the street I cross, I got you. If I can last 45 seconds through your rage and through your initial burst of energy, I'm going to choke you. And so, so that mentality of preparedness leads you. It's just like being prepared with a scholar. I've got some friends of mine that are in other religions, and I'm prepared, and they're asking questions and different things, and they try to trip you up, and it's like, okay, yeah, come with it, because I know if I can, I'm just gonna get through your little, atheist or your little, religious thing on this, and then it's like choke time.
Right. So, and just one more plug for it. Why would you not want to be the most dangerous person in the room? I mean, seriously.
I'm telling you.
and to mentally know that, and to have that self-confidence, because there's a lot of, speaking of just self-awareness, but people lacking self-awareness. I was talking with Pastor Grimaldi about this, and he's preaching at a singles thing. He's probably on his way back now, but he was talking about how this generation, my generation, our generation, is so lacking in self-awareness. And I thought I didn't think I was a bad man or anything, but I was like, I didn't walk into the gym thinking I was going to be, and I knew I was going to be horrible. But as you walk around your daily life, I'm 6'2", 230, I'll be all right,
Yeah.
Where you're like, no, you won't. So in the same way, spiritually speaking, if you don't put the time in, you're going to be messed up really quickly.
Yeah. It's scripture, and it's funny because I give the guys I teach are getting more scripture than what they really know. But I say, pride comes before a fall.
Yeah.
Okay. Pride comes before destruction, haughty spirit before a fall. When your ego will not allow you to learn. Okay. I know I've seen this amongst preachers. They don't think, well, hey, nobody can teach me anything. And I'm like, man, you're about to crash.
Right.
And so I think it's more than just knowing that, because I may not be the baddest guy in the room, but the baddest guy in the room is not going to beat me.
Right.
Okay. So that's a different mentality. I may not beat everybody in this room, but nobody in this room is going to beat me.
Right.
And if you do, you're going to pay a high price to beat me. And
Right.
so I think that too is that, people being self-aware, this generation, they don't know what they don't know. One of my favorite people as far as promoting jiu-jitsu, and I don't promote him or his podcast because he's foul at certain times, but he said, he's been training. He was a national taekwondo champion. He's got a black belt in from 2 instructors in jiu-jitsu. Okay. And he said, I am scared to fight. And he said, you watch these videos and these guys that get into fights, they don't know how to fight. But it's like they don't know what they don't know. They're not aware that some dude in this room might just kick my head in or choke me and it's like this generation, it permeates every part of this generation. They think they know it all. Right. And they don't know what they don't. I'm telling you, it's the hyper grace movement. It's like I feel like it's movement. Okay, so I got saved. My mother was 15 when she had me. Okay, most people don't realize that. Most people think because I live with Pastor Noonan, they sometimes think I'm a preacher's kid. Certain people, they're like, "Oh, you were raised in a preacher's." I'm like, "No, I wasn't. I actually lived with him. The end of my senior year, going into college." Okay, and so. But I was born in Gary, Indiana. That's that right there. That was the murder capital of the states at the time, if not the world. But born in Gary, and so I grew up in some tough situations. And but as I lost my train of thought a little bit. But you go through something like that. I think it was the purpose of what I was saying. And it's like certain people they in this grace movement, they're not the people that are coming from my situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
It's the radical grace movement and the modern day, soon to be apostate, new fundamental people is they don't know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So those of us that were not saved out of Christian homes, we recognize what they're doing right away.
Yep.
I recognize the music right away. I recognize the change of position on dress right away. I recognize these things, and I'm like, man, because they don't associate it with the same things I do. Okay, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But see, it's like a jiu-jitsu move, dude. I was telling my guys today after class, and I'm like, the reason why I choked you is 5 moves before I choked you.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, and the reason they are on people get all upset when you say, are you saying I'm on a slippery slope? And I said this, I think I was talking to Spencer Smith. I said, yeah, that's kind of what we're saying, because who you are going to be in 5 moves or 5 years from now started now. You didn't walk into the gym and become a blue belt just like that. That started years ago. And you didn't become who you are or lack thereof as a Baptist, as a Christian, or, taking Baptist outside because of who you are right now. You started on that path along, and Pastor said it, well, multiple people have said it, but your direction determines your destination. That's just simple. That is what it is. And you can't get away from that. And so, you're absolutely right. And I think that's people, the best way to learn is from the mistakes of others, right? Instead of your own mistakes.
Absolutely.
So, but people take an upbringing like yours and poo-poo it and think it's like you don't know what you're talking about. And like a Todd Monaghan or a lot of these guys that came out of Phil Claus, or a lot of these guys that came out of that guy that I follow a little bit, not a secular guy. One of his theses, one of his thoughts, and not because he's enjoys it or necessarily wants it to or whatever, but something he's noticed is this thought: hip hop rules the world. And what he means by that, and I was just talking to someone about a pastor friend of mine today. What he means by that is when you see 14, 15, 13-year-old little girls wearing ripped jeans, you know where that came from? 18 months ago, some rapper posted on Instagram in Atlanta wearing ripped jeans. And what he said was, and he called it right then, he said, in 18 months, the men are going to be wearing it too, which is hilarious because so it is some rapper in Atlanta wears it. And then people following him, his teeny bopper, these little girls following him, they have them now. And then in 18 more months, and it's these cycles, and we know what we can see. He's smart enough. It's pattern recognition.
Yep, exactly.
And the thing is, guys that are my age and me, we aren't old enough. We haven't seen enough iterations, enough generations to see the pattern yet, maybe. And I guess that's partly why some make the mistakes they do. But that's where you grab onto a guy like Dean Noonan or Joe Grimaldi or Dan Woodward, and you be like, they've seen it a couple times. They're not stupid. So go ahead.
It's funny because there's an expression that I heard from an older jiu-jitsu practitioner, and he was trying to correct a younger man who was kind of going on the wrong path. And he said, I was offering him guidance. And so a lot of the old school guys, they'll say, okay, I'm going to give you guidance. And they will use that term. And I was like, oh my goodness. That's what these guys need. Is there has to be some older men with wisdom, with discernment, with godly, with the fruit of the Spirit in his life that can say, listen, I'm going to offer you. Now you got to be willing to accept it too.
Right.
But there has to be somebody that you can get this guidance from to say, okay, man, you like you said, you can learn from mistakes of others. Okay. I will take a guy and say, man, this is why I do it the way I do it now, because I kept getting caught. I kept getting choked this way. And so this is why I was doing that. You need to learn from this and offer these guys guidance. And the fatal flaw of it is the same thing in Rehoboam. It's like they want to listen to people there. I see people all the time in the gym, and it's like a white belt talking to another white belt, and I'm like, dude,
let me show you how to do this heel hook here, man. It's like, no, that's not a good idea.
Okay, yeah, you got blue belts, you got purple belts, you got brown belts, and you got 4th degree black belts at our gym. It's like, dude, you don't ask this guy who's been training a week longer than you.
Right.
I think that's where these guys get caught up. It's like I said, there was a song somebody sent me, I think it's a song. I hope it's not secular, but they just sent me the phrase, "We're playing checkers while the devil's playing chess."
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think so many times these guys, I watched John Danaher, that the
Hmm.
mastermind behind so much of Jiu-Jitsu today. And he said this, he was watching a match between one of his students and somebody else. And he said, he was watching with another guy and he said, okay, that's where the match, he just lost right there. And he was like, what are you talking about? The match still has 2 minutes left. He's like, no, when he made that little move right there, that guy lost. Like my
Hmm.
guy won in that little move right there. And I think sometimes spiritually speaking, we, the Bible says we should not be ignorant of Satan's devices.
Hmm.
And a lot of times we are, because our adversary is walking about seeking who we may devour. I look at the devil now as like a jiu-jitsu player.
Hmm.
And he's looking for whatever. If your weakness is you keep turning to your side or you turn your back to that person, he's going to choke you.
Right.
And with Independent Baptist, I think he has looked at some of the weaknesses or the tendencies in these guys, and he's saying, "Oh, okay, all right, I'll
Right.
get him through this. I'll get him through music. I'll get him through philosophy. I'll get him."
Right.
And it's like, man, you guys got to listen to the guys that are trying to coach you. Yeah, they're not perfect, and yeah, they may have lost some matches themselves,
Hmm.
but there is not a better group of people that is getting the job done for the Lord.
Right. And
You
that's a
know,
great point. You're going against a player who's been playing the game for 6,000 years. And you want to talk
yeah,
about pattern recognition. He's seen
yeah,
it all. He's made it all happen
yep,
again and again, from the garden all the way to now. And you think you're going to play around with his stuff? Or you're going to get wade in deep water with him? It's
yeah,
like we're trying to bait him and thinking we're going to get away with it. It doesn't make any sense, because when you get to higher levels of stuff, you feint. And I'm speaking of this with
it's
zero experience,
true though.
but you feint a move, or you go for arm bar, and you end up somewhere, or you end up with something else.
Yeah,
And we're trying to play this game with the devil, and we need to stay in our lane, man. We
yeah,
got to stick with the, and people like get all lofty about the old time paths. It's like, no, there's a reason they're well trodden, and
yeah,
people haven't slipped and fallen there,
yeah,
because it's a good path.
yeah,
And yeah, I love that illustration of him being a jiu-jitsu player, because
yeah.
he is a black belt among black belts
Oh
of
my goodness.
choking Christians out.
It's funny, Brother Todd. One day we were the last time I was at football camp. I think it was like 2 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, and he said I was showing somebody else something. Him and I were like showing a couple people in his trailer or in his RV home. We
Hmm.
were showing some people some moves, and Todd stopped me. I was showing somebody something, and he stopped me, and he was like, "Did you guys just see what he did?" He was like, "Oh my goodness!" And he's like, "I think he's better than I am at jujitsu." And I thought it was funny, but I thought it was also very astute because Todd and I both trained, but I trained specifically jujitsu
Right. Right.
and only jujitsu, which
Mhm.
means I am hyper focused on jujitsu, whereas
Right.
he's got jujitsu and striking and
Mhm.
this,
Right.
and but he recognized just in some little movement that I made, he was like,
Hmm.
"Oh my goodness, did you see how he moved right there?"
Right.
And I think we have to one of the key missing words I think in our generation, I'm going to include myself because I still feel young, but is
Hey, well, we're in the same glasses, man. We gotta be, man.
exactly
We gotta
exactly. I gotta be cool, but um, is the word discernment.
hmm.
The
Yep.
word discernment I think is lacking in our generation, and I think of the wise men. I heard Brother Tony Hudson preach a message one time on the wise men,
Hmm.
and he talked about how they went another they use wisdom in saying, you know what, this King Herod is acting like he's going to go worship the baby,
Hmm.
but it's like something about it didn't sit right with these guys, and they're like, you know what, we're not going back the same way that we did. We're going in another direction from away from that guy
Yep.
because they used some discernment, even though this guy claimed that he wanted to worship.
Hmm.
Just like these
Hmm.
guys, they're like, "Oh, we want to worship God. We want to adore Jesus," and it's like, you know what? Once I've been with Jesus, once you've really been with Jesus,
That's good.
you are able to discern those who do not truly worship Him
Hmm.
and have no desire to. Herod wanted to worship himself.
Right.
Herod wanted to worship the idea, but he also wanted to destroy Jesus Christ.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
and these guys, and I'm not saying they want to destroy the church. I wouldn't say that, but they want to destroy the old time way.
Right.
And
Right.
they would rather, and it's so interesting because I look at it and I think it's almost like our political system where Kim Jong-un is more willing to work with Donald Trump than Democrats are.
Sure.
And it's like logic is turned on its head.
Right.
And I feel like it's the same. I feel like these guys that are ex-IFB and whatever they want to call themselves, some of them are more willing to negotiate with a Jehovah's Witness or Mormon or Muslim than they
Sure.
are independent Baptist preachers.
Right.
And they are more gracious to them,
Mm-hmm.
to lost people, than
Mm-hmm.
they are to their former independent Baptists.
Right.
You
Right.
know, and it's like there's no discernment to say they would. I think some of them they were like, if we close down, they'd be happy. But it's like they don't realize that they're trying to play checkers, man. But the devil's playing chess.
Right.
He's after souls. He's after our bus routes. He's after revival. He wants to shut that down, and I wouldn't want to be a part of what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
I would recognize it and say, oh wait a minute, this guy keeps letting me turn over this way. He's probably about to choke me.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And I think that's one of the things we don't realize sometimes is the devil doesn't really care if we do his will.
yeah.
He just, as long as we're not doing God's will. It's just like in a competition or whatever. As long, I'll let you score points as long as you score one less point than I do. That's all that matters. And so as long as you're not doing God's perfect will for your life, devil's fine with that. You can be a good person and you can be doing good things. And that's where I think a lot of times, people are coming to church there and they're winning souls and all that stuff. And I won't downplay souls being won, but there's the ends don't justify the means.
Right.
And it would be like in a jiu-jitsu tournament, just, hauling off and smacking somebody, hitting someone. Unless you're in combat jiu-jitsu, you got a problem, man. You got a lot of people mad at you. You got to play by the rules, and God has some rules. And I think a lot of things that are precept. I had Brother John O'Malley, you may not know him, but Brother John O'Malley on. But he, 3 P's: precept, given by God, a principle, and you've heard this before, but then preference. And they're assuming that all these things that are that we hold to, they're all preferences. Well, no, man, they're built on principles, built on precepts, and so you got to be careful with all that. So, what else you got going on, man? We got a few minutes left here. Jiu-jitsu, local church evangelist. If you had some parting words for the people at home, what would they be?
Oh man, just man, figure out what's important to you in life. That's something that if I could emphasize that to everybody, is God first, God, family, church, and they're not in competition with each other. They ought to complement each other. But I think, man, if we can get our priorities right, I think in our nation, in our homes, in our churches, it'll be straightened out. We have to get right with God. We have to get right with God. We have to allow him to permeate. And that's the revival part of what I do. Mm-hmm. It is getting people back. I say it all the time. I believe part of my ministry as an evangelist is getting to people to believe God is who he said he is. Mm-hmm. He can do what he says he can do. Okay. And we can trust him for who he is. And if we will get back to that, that is true revival in its essence. All the other stuff that comes along, revival is not people getting saved. It's not people crying. All those things happen when we believe God is who he says he is. He can do what he says he can do, and we trust him. Amen. And if we will get back to that, that's why my main focus is revival, because that's our personal relationship. Mm-hmm. Once we can get that right, we can start to begin to get our families right. Mm-hmm. Okay, we can start now that God has changed us. We can now begin to change our relationships with others, getting right with our spouses, getting right with our preachers, getting right with our fellow church members, getting right with our neighbors. Getting right with those who we work with. The Bible says, from whence cometh wars. And well, we have wars without because we have wars within. Mm-hmm. We're fighting. We're trying to live for the world and live for the devil. Live for God at the same time. It says no friendship of the world. All that in James chapter 2 and 4. It's like nope. It's a struggle going on inside of us. And when we struggle inside of us with living a worldly lifestyle and trying to live for Christ, there's going to be war without us. So we got to get right with God first, and we got to get right with our families, and then we got to get right with the church community, and then it'll spread out from there. If I could ever be a help to any of your folks, I'm a down to earth person. I am if somebody messages me, as long as they're not, asking me, did Mary have a little lamb? I will give them the time of day. but any churches out there, if we could be a help to you, we'd love to come. I sing also. I play the piano. My wife, when they're able to join me, my family isn't full time on the road with me. That's another conversation we like to have sometime. But my wife is actually a public school teacher. Awesome. And so she taught special ed, and now she's in a regular fourth grade around the corner from our church's school.
Very cool.
So God's allowed. I mean, I wish I could say all of what God is allowing her to do and influence there. It's amazing. People think it's a mission field. Mm-hmm. It really is. And I wish people would look at it that way and not just abandon the public school. Right. When Christians moved out 40 years ago, of course, it left a vacuum. And I think there are some reasons why. And my kids go to Christian school, so obviously I'm pro Christian school. But we cannot forget that mission field. I believe there's 48 million young people in our school systems. Wow. And we can rant and rave all we want to about where our nation's going. But if we leave these young people to themselves, a child left to himself causes mother shame. Mm-hmm. And when we leave these souls to themselves, they're going to cause us, our nation, and our God shame.
Right.
And God's looking. I think God's looking. I'm proud to say two of the four members of our quartet, their wives are public school teachers. Of the Faith Men Quartet. And that's another thing I'm passionate about. Man, how did I not bring up the quartet? But God's allowed us to make 8 CDs, and we're number 9 right now is already recorded. So it's getting ready to come out in a few months here. So we're excited about that. But yeah, man, keep the Lord close to you. Stay tender, folks. Stay humble, stay holy, per Pastor Noonan.
Amen. Stay humble, stay holy. I love that accountability he provides for you and put, keeping on you. And that's one of the beauties of being local church and having that shepherd, even as you're far afield, he's still looking out for you. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Man. Well, I greatly appreciate you taking the time. We're tapping on right at an hour. Let me see here where we at. We just went over an hour. This is officially the longest one. We just hit an hour.
And honestly, I feel like we just started, to be honest with you.
Yeah. No, I feel like we could talk jiu-jitsu for another couple of hours for sure, man.
I'm telling you, we got to do it again.
I got to get training so I can get that in person. And because I can tell you, like Todd said, you're definitely better at jiu-jitsu than I am. So I've got to get better. And I wouldn't recognize all the subtle little things, but absolutely. Hey, greatly appreciate it. If anyone takes anything away, go train jiu-jitsu, get close to God. Be humble. Be holy. Yeah. There's a cliff notes for you. You don't have to listen to the thing now. You're good to go if you missed it. But hey, I greatly appreciate it. Stick around for just a second. I'm going to end this thing, and we'll talk for just a moment, okay?